Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Here's what will boost XRP value according to Ripple's CTO. That's the headline from this article from the Crypto Basic. And I'm going to explain to you why this article even exists. David Schwartz was prompted to write a fairly lengthy response to a number of questions having to do with XRP and some broader ecosystem types of things here. And, David Schwartz is one of those people where anytime I see any post from him on my feed on X, I stop and I read it. And this was an absolute fantastic read. So I'm going to share with you exactly what he shared, along with my own thoughts along the way, of which I always have many. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I am a little bit opinionated. Also, he was asked, is XRP still essential for Ripple? Good question, actually. Especially considering that Ripple has, launched their own stablecoin RLUSD. That was just this past December. Do we even need XRP anymore? Plenty to discuss. But before going further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so just yesterday, there was this post from Andre Jick. Now, many of you will be familiar with him. He happens to be a rather famous finance guy, not specifically in crypto, though he'll cover some crypto stuff, but he's just broadly known as a finance guy. He got famous and became very successful on YouTube, actually. And this is his channel now. You can see he's got 2.68 million subscribers. So he's one of the larger finance YouTubers on the planet. And he just so happens to be talking about XRP, including recently. But again, it's not a crypto channel per se here. And he had a rocky start with the XRP community, let's say. So let me just get you up to speed on his history with XRP and the XRP community specifically. Here is his first video on XRP ever. This video, now titled "My Thoughts on Ripple and XRP," was published on May 28th, 2021. It's now been seen 385,000 times. So that's a lot of eyeballs on this thing. So what he says, you would hope that it would be pretty darn accurate. Unfortunately, it was not even almost that. And I do not say this to be a jerk to him at all. I'm just getting you guys caught up to speed. I actually think that he does a great job running his YouTube channel, but I'm just stating matter-of-factly, he was disastrously wrong about XRP. And so I made a response video. It was like his video about XRP, and it went out to, at the time, here's a screen grab from my video showing his channel at the time. Back then he had 1.58 million subscribers. And I was like, with it going out to that many sets of eyeballs, and we're in a bull market at the time, that's what I'm thinking. So I was like, I'm going to respond to this. And so I did. I made a very lengthy response video. It was 38 minutes long. I went into detail about every single thing he had to say, and it took me just hours and hours and hours to put that thing together and record it and go through it. But I went through all of the stuff that he said and explained why he was disastrously wrong. And at the time, his video, his first XRP video, it's this one on your screen right here. You can see it in my screen grab. He titled it, "Avoid This Cryptocurrency." And there's a picture of him holding up a coin with not the XRP logo on it, but the Ripple logo on it. And he says, "Avoid this cryptocurrency." Now, he got ripped to shreds in a way that obviously he would not be used to running a successful and accurate finance channel where he's just sharing wisdom and thoughtful advice, so on and so forth. And again, he really does do a great job with that. So I think he was just out of his depths here. He was totally surprised when he got the biggest backlash he'd ever seen in his entire life after putting out a video. And to the point where he retitled it. Instead of having the title here as "Avoid This Cryptocurrency," it's what you see on the screen here now. He renamed it to "My Thoughts on Ripple and XRP." But the damage was already done. He reported so many things that were just factually incorrect, and I think he was operating in good faith. I don't think he was trying to be a fudster. I don't even think he suffers from XRP derangement syndrome. I just think he did some research that wasn't sufficient enough. And he probably Googled something, and then the first thing that popped up, he ran with it. But the problem is when it comes to Ripple and XRP, XRP's been under attack for over a decade. So you can type in any number of things, and you're going to come up with false information, lies, bad opinions. And I think he just ran with some of those. So he was kind of a victim of like the toxic Bitcoin maximalist himself in that case, but he didn't do a service to anybody that was subscribed to his channel or viewed these videos, unfortunately. So again, I put out a video, I responded, and then Andre Jick, he did see my video because so many people pointed him in my direction, apparently. And so he wrote to me, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but he said, this is a response to my video, and he said, "Thanks for the video response, and thank you for taking the time to make it. I learned a few new things about Ripple and XRP. I still have a few concerns." And then he listed a bunch of concerns here, and everything that he asked here, quite literally everything, I answered in great detail in my 38-minute video, which he was responding to here. So he didn't actually watch it, or at least he didn't watch my whole video. I guess 30 minutes is kind of long, but whatever. And so we just asked the same thing. So I was like, ah. But I did end up putting out another video, responding to some of that stuff. But a few days ago, he put out this video. So he seems to have come around, but he's still trying to understand some things that are on a fundamental level. But a few days ago, he put out this video titled "Why XRP Could Explode." So he's come a long way from avoid this cryptocurrency to why XRP could explode, which brings us to where we are right now. And so it's just literally yesterday, he shared this post and he wrote, "I know people are very opinionated about this." And he bolded very. And actually, I'm going to mention this before I forget it. After he put out that first video in 2021 about XRP, he got such backlash that he said, "I will never make another video about XRP ever again." And he's since made several, but at the time he was just like, "Nope, I'm out." So he says, anyway, "I know people are very opinionated about this, but I've been following XRP since 2014, and I still have not found the answers to these questions, genuinely looking for thoughtful responses." Okay, now, he is asking here legitimate and good questions. It's perfectly reasonable to ask every question that's on your screen right now. I'm just surprised that anybody that's been following XRP since 2014 wouldn't already know the answers to these things, but they are good questions. And so David Schwartz actually responded to this. And so I'm going to run through everything that he had to say here, because he answered every single question from Andre Jick. And I'll just share my own thoughts along the way here. But on the first one, here's the first question from Andre. "Ripple has 300 plus bank partnerships, but after 13 years, shouldn't there be billions in daily on-chain volume?" And so David said, "I think there are a number of reasons why institutions have historically preferred to use digital assets off-chain rather than on-chain. I think we're close to changing that because institutions are starting to see the benefits of moving on-chain. But I agree it has been very slow. Even Ripple can't use the XRP Ledger decentralized exchange for payments yet because we can't be sure a bad guy won't provide the liquidity for payment." So a bad actor. Somebody may be trying to do some nefarious illegal type stuff here. He's like, so we can't use it for that because we can't even be sure, if it's coming from somebody that is unsavory. And so he says, "Features like permissioned domains will address this." Yeah, so that's a great response, but I'll certainly also add here, crypto, I mean, you could argue that it's finally getting to a point where it's out of nascency. I guess you could. I'm used to just viewing it as something in its nascency, even in recent years. But it has been growing, just adoption in general. And so most transactions on chain, a lot of it's just, there's pure speculation. And not even all that's on chain, because, a lot of the stuff that exchanges are doing with centralized exchanges, it wouldn't necessarily have to be on chain. They're just keeping their own ledgers internally. But setting that aside, it's very obvious to me anyway, that, if you fast forward, you will see like crazy numbers in the future. But, it's just like when Amazon launched, they were Amazon Books. Remember that? And if you asked Amazon Books in the 90s when they launched, how come you don't sell, technology items? Why don't you sell pet food? Why don't you sell office supplies? Why don't you sell furniture? Why don't you sell children's toys? Why don't you sell, what's this? What's this little piddly book thing you're doing here? It's like, you got to understand, it takes time for businesses and industries and asset classes to grow, especially when they're new. I mean, this asset class has only been around for 16 years. So I do think you got to give it a little bit of time here, but just understand big picture, like that's the direction we're going. And then there was also this question: if XRP is volatile, why use it over stablecoins for transfers? Great question. Here's what David Schwartz had to say. There are use cases where volatility isn't a minus or is even a plus. Generally, for most digital assets, the general view is that the upside is worth more than the downside. So as long as you aren't very risk averse, holding it is not really a disadvantage. Yeah, so that's certainly true. And I'll also add, though, given that these transactions utilizing XRP as a bridge currency effectively settle in real time, you're really at any given moment not getting a whole lot of volatility there. You really aren't. And Ripple's done the math on this, obviously. So there isn't, you're not in a situation where it's some ridiculous problem. Now, that said, as I pointed out in the past, if you're worried about whether or not XRP is going to be a dominant force as a bridge currency, well, given that Ripple's the only like there is no company that's competing in this market the same way that Ripple is, and I've talked about this in depth, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but I will just say that given that Ripple is basically the first mover for this type of use case, utilizing a cryptocurrency as a bridge currency, they have all the incentive in the world to continue pushing for XRP to be a key cryptocurrency, the key cryptocurrency for cross-border payments. So given that that's the case, as long as Ripple's in the driver's seat here, what do you think's going to happen? And obviously they've added RLUSD, and there are certain jurisdictions where it makes sense to do so and so, and that's fine. Like, for instance, corridors touching the United States currently because of the legal nonsense with the SEC, and maybe this changes one day, but they've only used for the United States corridors, they've only been using for years and years and years now stable coins. So there are things like that, but outside of that, XRP is used pretty much everywhere else. Here's the next question: if volatility is not an issue because it's a bridge currency, what is the incentive to hold it? It depends on what he's actually meaning. I'm sitting here thinking, as I read that the first time, I was like, what does he actually mean by that? Because, if you're talking specifically, like from like a business that's using it specifically to bridge, or what's the incentive to hold it if you're me or you? If you're just talking volatility in general, obviously this is a nascent asset class, and the asset class is exploding, and the more money flows in, the more it's worth. Like, I shouldn't have to explain something that basic. But again, since he said if volatility is not an issue because it's a bridge currency, what is the incentive to hold it? I just think it. Do you mean from a speculator? Like, for me, I speculate in the crypto markets, including with XRP. You mean like that? Because like my whole thesis here, like at the core of it, it's that utility matters and will win the day. Those cryptocurrencies that are functionally useful are going to be worth a fortune in the future. So I personally, I'm not even using it for anything. I've just been sitting on it, but that's fine. There are people and businesses that do use it. That's why I'm comfortable having putting various very serious money invested into it because of that, because those people are using it. And it's because I do want the volatility. So volatility is certainly not an issue. It just isn't. And if he's asking that because he has some recognition that it's because XRP is so fast that the volatility doesn't matter for XRP's function as a bridge currency, then I don't understand why he had his previous question saying, why would it be better than stablecoins? That doesn't make sense then. So I'm not 100% sure what he meant, but David Schwartz had a great answer. And so David Schwartz said, a bridge currency only works if someone is holding it so that you can get it precisely when you need it. But I think that in practice, if you don't know what asset you will need to hold next, you may hold the dominant bridge currency because it should be cheaper to exchange into whatever you happen to need next. Yeah, and so that's certainly true. There are tons of reasons that XRP can make a whole lot of sense, even for businesses, just large entities to hold. And just keep in mind, there's always going to be a spot for a jurisdictionless cryptocurrency like XRP. So even if stable coins are great, and I think we're going to get into this a little, it might be in the next question actually, but even if stable coins do, and I believe they do right now, and they're going to always have some percentage of the market in terms of facilitating foreign exchange transactions. You're never going to have a stable coin that can do that for every jurisdiction on the planet, if for no other reason, geopolitical reasons. Can you think of a few nations that wouldn't want to do anything to support the dollar, for example, which means they also wouldn't want to support any stable coin that's backed by the dollar and U.S. treasuries? Can you think of any? Well, that means that you need something else there. And so you can have multiple stable coins, but then also already if you have multiple stable coins, they're going to need to be bridged somehow. You got to connect all of this. And if you think that you never need a bridge currency, and he gets this a little bit later on, but I'll just bring it up now since I'm thinking about it. And he didn't word it like this. He didn't word anything like this. This is just my own thought. I just haven't mentioned this probably in years at this point because it doesn't come up that frequently. But if you want a world where you don't need a bridge currency to bridge assets, whether it's currencies or cryptocurrencies or various assets, if you want to get to a world where you don't need a bridge currency, the only way you could do it, which is not remotely realistic, is you'd have to have every human on the planet trade on one exchange and have all the liquidity, literally all the liquidity on the planet, all on one exchange. And all humans are using just that. Because then, if you had that, you would have every single possible trading pair that there could ever possibly be with very deep liquidity. But since that will never be the case, and people will always be using different platforms to trade various things, you're not always going to have deep liquidity with various things. You're going to need bridge currencies. You're not even going to have every trading pair on every platform, duh. Like, that's just the case. You're not going to. You're always going to need a bridge currency. And you're not always going to have jurisdictions where a US-backed stablecoin is going to work. So doesn't it make sense to just have a dominant bridge currency that is jurisdictionless, and so geopolitical tensions are never going to be an issue then? Because XRP is that thing. And it does a whole bunch of other stuff too. It's not like XRP has to be a bridge currency, and then if it fails there, it can't be successful. That's not even true. There's multiple use cases for XRP, including tokenizing assets, for example. But and you can actually use it as money. There are a number of things you can do with it, obviously. But to think that stable coins are just by default going to win, no. And so, I mean, he's asking the right questions here. I am kind of surprised, given that he's been into this, as he said, since 2014, that he hadn't been able to find a human with thoughtful answers on this, because there's all sorts of thoughtful answers. And David Schwartz has thoughtful answers, and mine are a bit different than his, and that's fine. And there are more answers than this, even. There are a lot of perspectives on this. Next one here. Oh, I read this one right. Yeah, okay, that was the last one I read. He asked, are bridge currencies still necessary when stablecoins will cover most pairs in the future? Okay, and so that gets into what I just said a minute ago about, and I know I was getting a little bit ahead, but it was on my mind, and I want to make sure I didn't forget it. Again, unless you're going to have an exchange with literally every single trading pair that could exist with deep liquidity, and that's what every human on the planet uses, unless you can make that happen, and you can't, then you're going to need to bridge. You're going to need to bridge stuff, whether it's currencies or cryptocurrencies or assets, because you're not going to have every trading pair on every single exchange with deep liquidity. That's not realistic. So yes, bridge currencies, they're always going to be necessary. Because stablecoins are never going to be able to cover everything. Nor is that desire. And there are also other reasons that XRP can and should exist outside of being a bridge currency. So there are tons of reasons that we're safe on XRP. Like, obviously, there's a reason that it's one of the most useful cryptocurrencies and most adopted coins out there, and why there's all this institutional interest, as I was talking about in my last video. But here's what David Schwartz had to say. If one stablecoin wins, then no. You would just use that stablecoin as the bridge currency. But I don't think one stablecoin can win for several reasons, including that a stablecoin can only be stable relative to one particular fiat currency and will always have jurisdictional ties. And so, folks, obviously, what the dollar is worth against any other currency, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be the Thai baht, it could be Brazilian real, it could be the euro. It doesn't matter. So what is it stable to? Do you see the problem there? And so then he says, if we're in a multi-stablecoin world, it still makes sense to have a bridge asset that serves the long tail of tokenized securities, loan portfolios, and so on. And folks, that's exactly what it's getting at. You're always going to need a bridge. It's just so odd. Anyway, Next question. Why would giants like BlackRock use XRP Ledger for tokenization instead of building their own blockchain? Robinhood uses Arbitrum and plans their own. And David Schwartz said, I'm not sure how much that will really matter so long as we have interoperability and asset portability. Multiple chains are a good form of scalability as well, but I think the best way to see why they might is to ask the same question about Circle. Why don't they launch USDC? That's I'm sure most of you know, but USDC was launched by Circle. So why don't they, Circle, launch USDC only on their own blockchain? You can see why that's obviously silly. I think the same kind of logic will apply to tokenized real-world assets over the next year or two. Yeah, that's spot on. And so USDC, that stablecoin, it's on multiple blockchains, including recently the XRP Ledger. It was finally added. So Circle could just launch their own blockchain and have it only there, but you see why that would not be to their benefit, right? It's because there are a bunch of users on various blockchains, and if you want to pick up the activity and further adoption on those chains, then you need to go to where those people are. That's why I always said it would be ridiculous for USDC to not eventually come in and compete against RLUSD. Like that, it wouldn't make sense not to, frankly. Why would they cede that ground? It doesn't make any sense here. And then, but as far as tokenizing assets in general, like why doesn't BlackRock just do their own thing? Well, why don't they just use a database? I don't know, man. Like if you're talking about creating a walled garden, I mean, what would it look like? Would it be that, or would it still be decentralized, but BlackRock creates it? And if BlackRock creates something that's decentralized, then who cares who runs it anyway? So are you saying that why would they use something that's decentralized instead of something that's centralized? Is that your real question? I'm not 100% sure, actually. Maybe that's what his actual question is, decentralized versus centralized. The truth of the matter is, like, having it as something that is decentralized and it's trustless, it's just there, it's immutable on a blockchain, and picking up all the efficiencies make it attractive for firms to tokenize assets. That's why it's happening right now, in a nutshell. So, of course, with XRP being fantastic for payments broadly speaking, it's not surprising at all, given how cheap XRP transactions are and how they settle in real time. It's not surprising that XRP Ledger, to this point, has gotten its share of that. Now, it won't get all of it, but there will be multiple chains that have multiple financial assets tokenized, and it makes sense because it makes sense to have tokenization occur on decentralized platforms. I think that should be it shouldn't be just like, why would they do it on XRP Ledger? I mean, you can ask specifically, why would you want it on this decentralized platform versus this other decentralized platform, but that's not quite what he asked. But if that's the case, I mean, that's what people are figuring out. And part of it really is, if there are multiple platforms that have adoption, go to where the users are. That's what I was saying about USDC a minute ago. If there are multiple users, and there's going to be some overlap from chain to chain, sure, some overlap of users, but you go to where the users are, right? Doesn't that just make sense? So yeah, obviously it makes sense to have it decentralized and then launch it on XRP Ledger and any number of other chains too that you want to. And then you're going to see that over time, for various reasons, actual users are going to gravitate towards certain chains, and those will be the winners. There will be a handful of chains that are very clearly dominant for real-world asset tokenization. I'm just saying, so far it's working out well for the XRP Ledger, and there's good reason to believe it will continue to. So we need that to play out, but that's the thought behind it. That's a general thought process here. And then his final question, he says, geopolitical risk, why would foreign countries trust a US-based private company payment network? Okay. Here's David's response, and it is perfect. He said, if you're asking about XRP Ledger, it's not really US-based. It has never discriminated against any particular participant, and if it ever started to, I would hope people would stop using it. If you mean Ripple's enterprise payment products, we have separately licensed entities in many jurisdictions. But obviously, you're not going to see it in North Korea or Cuba anytime soon, and there might be, in some cases, pushback to a US company having some control over, say, payments between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. We build trust and we make hay where the sun shines. Spot on. And so, given that the thrust of what he was getting at here all had to do with XRP specifically, I'm assuming when he's talking about geopolitical risk, he's talking about XRP, right? But why would that be a concern given that the XRP ledger is decentralized and is not US based because it's global? This is the same reason. Remember earlier this year when President Trump was talking about US made cryptos and this and that? I was like, I just kind of rolled my eyes like, I'm for it, only in that I'm biased in anything that's going to pump my bags. I'm like, okay, I'm selfishly for it. But honestly, as I said months ago, it doesn't make logical sense to support XRP or any of the coin that's created in the United States just because it was created in the United States, because it doesn't live in the United States. It's global because it's decentralized. And there are nodes all over the freaking planet that make the XRP ledger functional. There's a reason the XRP blockchain works. And it's because of people that live all over the entire planet. It's not a US coin. And so I'm kind of surprised, like some of this stuff I'm kind of surprised he had never gotten an answer to or thought through sufficiently, like including that one. I'm just a little surprised by that. And then there's this question, this is from somebody else. Is XRP still essential for Ripple? We hear a lot about RLUSD, but almost nothing about XRP anymore. And here's David Schwartz's response. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty sure XRP's use as a bridge in Ripple payments dwarfs every other asset. I think stablecoins win for collateral use cases. Volatile collateral is annoying. And edge use cases, volatility at the on/off ramps is also annoying. For almost everything else, I still think digital assets work better. Unless you're risk averse, you'd probably prefer to hold most top-tier digital assets over cash. Well, folks, I'll just speak for myself. Yes, I would much rather hold crypto over cash. Cash loses value. Crypto tends to go up. As long as you have quality cryptos over time, they go up. And then he says, I also think, and this is what I was talking about at the outset of the video, one of the things anyway. David says, I also think that more use of XRP Ledger for real financial use cases will translate to more utility and value for XRP. XRP is a privileged place on the XRP Ledger and is not as likely to get worked around as, say, Ethereum has been. And so, folks, that goes to my core investment thesis, which I have been talking about on this channel since I launched this channel at the end of 2018, which is that utility matters and will win the day. What's going to cause the price of XRP to go up? Well, I mean, yeah, there's kind of mindless speculation, this and that, but at the core, why would XRP rise consistently over time? And why has XRP always been in the top 10 coins by market cap its entire existence when there are thousands of coins and there's only 3 coins that have always been in the top 10? That's Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. Why? Why are those ones staying up there? It's clearly not a fluke. That wouldn't be possible. So why is it up there? It's because of fundamentals. There are enough people that understand the fundamentals that it just stays there. And then when you get the crazy euphoria, then it's not about fundamentals. You get these crazy big green candles where you can get life-changing wealth if you sell at those times. So that's why I'm here. But it's here for the long haul because people like me believe that as long as something's useful, it's probably not going to go to zero. Because why would something that's genuinely useful to people and businesses not end up trending upward over the time as more and more people figure that out? So that's it in a nutshell. All that to say, XRP is fantastic, ain't going nowhere except for up, trend-wise anyway. And in terms of adoption, like it's already won. Like it already just is successful, and that is that. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.